The long-awaited interim report into the coal seam gas inquiry was released today, and it doesn't make for easy reading for regulators or the industry. The recommendations from the Senate inquiry for the federal government to ruminate over for the next 2 months could fetter the industry considerably. Earlier, I spoke to the inquiry's chairman and one of the only federal politicians to have had mud on his boots, farmer and Senator Bill Heffernan. Senator Heffernan, you've been a long-time critic of what you called cowboy regulation in this sector. Just how much scrutiny do you believe went into the potential risks for coal seam gas before the Queensland government handed out those 3 big licences?
Most definitely a simple answer, not enough. I mean, the government's own advice, which is a document that we tabled, one of their latest series of advice, which is dated 2006, pointed to some of the issues which have not been addressed, and obviously the incentive of a royalty line and an expansion of capital in Gladstone, 10,000 jobs, etc., was an inducement the government obviously was taken over with. But against the knowledge that we've found from a clean sheet of paper when we started, bear in mind this is an interim report, that the consideration of things to what do you do with 1 million tonnes of salt a year, what do you do with dewatered aquifers, that they proposed money would make good, I think was quite irresponsible. Now,
you don't want at this stage anything unwound, and that, of course, would be a new level of sovereign risk, but you've got some very serious recommendations. You want a moratorium on the awarding of any further licences, and, for example, a requirement that the approvals be subject to all fluids extracted after fracking kept isolated in separate storages and prior to disposal are treated to the highest standards. Would that be retrospective?
Well, I suppose it'd be immediate. I mean, it'll be up to governments. Bear in mind that in private discussions, this is a unanimous. By the way, this report is a unanimous report from all political persuasions, with additional remarks from some political operatives. But obviously, I think there's been some serious errors made. One of the retrospective recommendations we have made is that farmers who've signed up in some circumstances under extreme duress ought to have the opportunity to renegotiate their agreement.
You mentioned salt earlier. You recommend that salt and brine be removed from water catchments and no controlled landfills for the disposal of salt permitted anywhere in the Murray-Darling Basin. Do you think this would come as a shock to some of the corporates?
Well, it may well come as a shock. It certainly wouldn't come as a shock to farmers. One of the things that the industry thought they could get away with was re-injection of the saline water. Bear in mind we're talking several hundred gigalitres a year across the industry, could be re-injected into the aquifers. In most circumstances that is not going to work. We do know that from the evidence given to us, from one mining tenement of 7,000 mines, there'll be 3 million, bit over 3 million tonnes of salt, which, by the way, is a pile of salt probably 30 metres wide, 10 metres high, and because it slopes at 32 degrees and has 806 kilograms per cubic metre
you've done some back of the envelope here.
It would be 25 kilometres long, this pile of salt.
You also want gas production to be excluded altogether from highly productive land, and where the two of them compete, agriculture and gas, you want agriculture to have a priority and a fund raised by the companies involved in the industry to fix up any problems. How do you think this is going to go down with the industry?
Well, it'll be part of the legal obligation. I mean, the industry at the present time thought they could waltz in, and some of them are well managed, some of them are serious cowboys, and just with a chequebook they buy their way through all the problems. As I said to Mr Wilkinson from APIA in Brisbane at the hearings, how do you make good a contaminated aquifer with a chequebook, for God's sake? Senator
Bill Heffernan, some very imposing recommendations for the industry to chew on. Thank you so much for joining us.
I would advise all your readers to read the report. It's very comprehensive, and thank you, Tiki, and good evening.